The masses are taught to worship large numbers, millions, tens of millions, a distant threshold that always seems just out of reach, and they are told that this is where wealth begins, that this is the moment life changes, that this is the point where freedom finally arrives. But this belief is not an accident. It is a construction, a carefully engineered illusion designed to keep them running without ever arriving, because a man chasing a million is a man who will tolerate almost anything. He will accept endless work without leverage. He will confuse consumption with reward. He will mistake dependency for ambition. And in doing so, he remains predictable, manageable, and most importantly, controllable. The illusion serves power, not truth. It keeps people in motion, but never in control. The reality, however, is far less glamorous and far more dangerous to the system that depends on obedient participants. Wealth does not begin at $1 million. It begins at $100,000 in liquid cash. And this number is not significant because it impresses others, but because it quietly alters the structure of your existence. Because for the first time, you are no longer negotiating with survival itself. And when survival loosens its grip, something far more valuable emerges: the ability to think. Before this threshold, your decisions are not truly yours, even if you believe they are. When rent is due, when bills accumulate, when basic needs demand immediate attention, your mind is forced into a narrow corridor where only short-term outcomes matter. And in that state, strategy becomes impossible, because strategy requires distance, and distance requires stability, and stability requires resources. Without them, every choice you make is reactive, not deliberate, and a reactive man does not control his life. He merely responds to it. This is where the true nature of poverty reveals itself. Poverty is not a lack of money. It is the condition of being forced into short-term thinking. It is the inability to delay decisions, to evaluate options, to act with intention rather than urgency. And as long as you are trapped in this condition, you cannot build power. Because power is not built through scattered reactions, it is built through controlled, sustained, and calculated moves over time. This is why $100,000 matters, not because it makes you rich, but because it removes the immediate threat of instability. It creates a buffer between you and chaos, and in that buffer, something rare appears: clarity. And with clarity comes the ability to see beyond the next bill, beyond the next obligation, beyond the next crisis, and to begin asking different questions, not "how do I survive this month?" but "how do I position myself for the next 5 years?" And this shift in questioning is the true beginning of wealth. Because the moment you stop thinking like a survivor, you begin thinking like a strategist. And strategy is where control lives. Here is where the thinking of Niccolò Machiavelli becomes unavoidable. Because Machiavelli understood a truth that most people spend their entire lives avoiding. Those who are consumed by necessity cannot exercise power, they can only submit to it. Because necessity dictates behavior. And the man who cannot refuse, who cannot wait, who cannot choose differently, is not free. He is governed by circumstance. In The Prince, Machiavelli does not speak of money in the modern sense, but he speaks constantly of control, of independence, of the ability to act without being constrained by forces outside oneself. And if you translate his ideas into the modern world, the principle becomes brutally clear. Money, at its core, is not about luxury. It is about removing constraints. It is about buying distance from necessity, and the more distance you have, the more calculated your actions can become. A man with no money must accept terms. A man with some money can negotiate. A man with enough money can refuse. And the ability to refuse is where power begins. This is why the first $100,000 is not a financial milestone, but a psychological and strategic one. Because it marks the moment when you are no longer entirely governed by urgency, when you can begin to choose rather than react, when you can step back instead of being pushed forward. And in that space, however small it may seem, lies the beginning of real control over your life. Without it, you are not building a future, You are merely extending the present. And a man who is forced to live day by day, decision by decision, crisis by crisis, will never accumulate power. Because power requires patience, and patience requires security. And security must be purchased. So the question is no longer whether $1 million is impressive. That question belongs to the crowd. The real question is far more precise, far more uncomfortable, and far more important. At what point do you stop being controlled by survival and start controlling the game itself? Strategy 1. Self-denial as a form of power. The first instinct of the average person, when they begin to earn more, is expansion. They upgrade their environment, increase their consumption, and surround themselves with symbols that signal progress. But this instinct is not strength, it is exposure. Because every new expense is not merely a cost, it is a claim on your future behavior, a silent obligation that dictates what you must continue to earn, accept, and tolerate in order to sustain it. And in this way, what appears to be growth is often nothing more than a deeper form of dependency. The disciplined individual moves in the opposite direction. He contracts before he expands. He reduces before he accumulates. He removes before he builds. Not because he lacks ambition, but because he understands something the crowd refuses to accept. Every unnecessary expense is a loss of strategic flexibility, and flexibility is the foundation of power. To cut expenses is not an act of deprivation, it is an act of control. When you eliminate non-essential spending, you are not simply saving money, you are lowering the threshold required to survive. And when the cost of your survival decreases, your tolerance for risk increases, your ability to say no strengthens, and your dependence on any single source of income weakens. This is not a financial adjustment. It is a structural shift in your position within the game. Consider the implications carefully. A man who requires $3,000 a month to live must protect that number at all costs. He must maintain his job, preserve his image, accept unfavorable conditions, and avoid disruption, because any instability threatens his ability to sustain that level of consumption. But a man who has trained himself to live on $1,000 a month operates under a completely different set of rules, because now he needs less, fears less, and therefore can act more freely. He can experiment. He can endure temporary losses. He can reject poor opportunities. And most importantly, he can wait. And the ability to wait is one of the most underestimated forms of power. Niccolò Machiavelli understood this principle in a different context, but the logic remains identical. In The Prince, he repeatedly emphasizes that those who are not constrained by immediate necessity are the ones capable of decisive and calculated action, while those who are pressured by circumstances are forced into reactive decisions that often undermine their long-term position. And if you translate this into financial behavior, the conclusion becomes clear. Reducing your needs is not about living poorly. It is about removing the leverage that circumstances have over you. This is why the rules of this strategy appear extreme to those who are still operating under the illusion of comfort. Do not eat out, not because you cannot afford it, but because you are training yourself to reject unnecessary convenience. Do not consume for appearance, because every attempt to signal status is a reinforcement of insecurity. Do not take on debt for depreciating assets, because debt is not just a financial burden, it is a behavioral leash. Each of these actions serves a single purpose: to reduce the number of external forces that can influence your decisions. Because the more you depend on maintaining a certain lifestyle, the less control you have over your own behavior. And control, true control, requires the ability to operate independently of pressure. The conclusion is unavoidable. The man who controls his spending controls the pace of his life. And the man who controls the pace of his life is no longer being moved by the system. He begins to move within it on his own terms. Strategy 2. Reclaiming time from the masses. If money is the visible resource, time is the hidden one. It is more valuable, more limited, and far more easily stolen. The average person does not lose time dramatically. It is not taken from them in large, obvious portions, but in small, seemingly harmless fragments, minutes spent scrolling, hours lost to passive consumption, attention diluted across trivial distractions, and over time, these fragments accumulate into something far more significant, a life that has been quietly redirected away from intentional action. The masses do not guard their time. They exchange it freely for comfort, entertainment, and escape. And in doing so, they unknowingly transfer control of their future to those who do. The disciplined individual recognizes this pattern and acts accordingly. He does not attempt to control all of his time at once. That would be unrealistic and unsustainable, but he identifies specific windows where control can be asserted with precision. And these windows, when used consistently, create disproportionate results. The early morning, the late evening, these are not magical hours. They are simply periods where external interference is minimal and internal resistance can be managed through routine. During these hours, the rules change. There is no consumption. Only production, no reaction, only deliberate action. This distinction is critical. Consumption is passive. It conditions your thinking based on external inputs, shaping your perception without requiring effort. While production is active, it forces you to create, to solve, to engage with reality directly. And in doing so, it strengthens your ability to operate independently of influence. A man who begins his day consuming information is placing himself in a reactive position before he has even taken his first meaningful action. A man who begins his day producing something, writing, building, learning through execution, asserts control immediately. The same applies to the evening. Most people end their day by disengaging, by seeking relief from effort, by numbing themselves with entertainment. But the disciplined individual uses this time differently. He extends his control beyond the standard limits, extracting additional value from hours that others have already surrendered. This is not about working endlessly. It is about working deliberately. Because time that is not controlled will be controlled by something else, by algorithms, by social expectations, by convenience, by habit. And once your time is controlled, your direction is no longer your own. Machiavelli's philosophy again provides a clear parallel. He wrote extensively about the importance of anticipating events rather than reacting to them, of shaping circumstances rather than being shaped by them. And in the context of time, this translates into a simple but unforgiving rule. If you do not decide how your time is used, someone else will. The conclusion is precise. Time, when left unmanaged, becomes a resource that others exploit. Time, when controlled, becomes a weapon that compounds. And the difference between the two is not intelligence, not talent, but discipline applied consistently in the moments that most people ignore. Strategy 3. Learning what the market pays for. The modern individual is encouraged to follow passion, to pursue interests, to explore identity, to learn for the sake of self-expression. And while these ideas appear liberating, they often conceal a fundamental misunderstanding of how value is created in the real world. Because the market does not reward intention, it does not reward effort in isolation. And it certainly does not reward personal preference. It rewards utility. This is where most people fail. They build skills in isolation from demand. They develop knowledge that has no direct application. They invest time into capabilities that no one is willing to pay for. And then they are surprised when the results do not match their expectations. The disciplined individual approaches this differently. He does not begin with himself. He begins with the market. He observes what businesses are already paying for, what problems customers are actively trying to solve, where money is already flowing, and then he positions himself within that flow, because it is far easier to capture existing demand than to create it from nothing. This is not a creative exercise. It is a strategic one. The rules are simple, but they require restraint. One skill, one market, one revenue stream. Anything beyond this introduces complexity, and complexity reduces effectiveness. When you focus on a single skill, you accelerate mastery. When you focus on a single market, You understand its needs more deeply. When you focus on a single revenue stream, you optimize for results rather than distraction. Most people resist this level of focus because it feels limiting. In reality, it is the opposite. It is what allows you to gain traction. Machiavelli understood the importance of specialization in a different form. He warned against divided attention, against attempting to control too many variables at once, because doing so weakens execution and exposes vulnerabilities. And in the context of skill acquisition, the same principle applies. Dispersion is weakness. Concentration is power. Your value, therefore, is not determined by how you perceive yourself. It is determined by how the market evaluates your usefulness. This is an uncomfortable truth, but it is also a liberating one, because once you accept it, the path becomes clear. You no longer guess. You no longer wander. You observe, you align, and you execute. And as your skill increases, as your output improves, as your results become measurable, your value rises, not in theory, but in practice, not in opinion, but in transaction. And transaction is the only validation that matters. Because in the end, the market does not care who you believe you are. It only responds to what you can consistently deliver. Strategy 4. Learning through collision, not illusion. Most people confuse learning with accumulation. They collect information, consume content, and mistake familiarity for competence, believing that understanding something intellectually is equivalent to being able to execute it in reality. But the market does not reward what you know. It rewards what you can repeatedly produce under pressure, and this distinction is where the majority quietly fail without realizing it. Knowledge, in isolation, has no economic value. Behavior, repeated and refined, does. A man can read 100 books on persuasion and still fail to close a single deal, while another, with minimal theoretical understanding but constant exposure to real interactions, develops instinct, timing, and adaptability that no book can provide, because reality introduces variables that theory cannot simulate. Resistance, unpredictability, consequence, and it is only through repeated collision with these variables that true skill is formed. This is why volume is not optional. It is foundational. You do not learn by preparing endlessly. You learn by producing excessively. By placing yourself in situations where feedback is immediate and unavoidable, where results cannot be debated or rationalized, where failure is visible and therefore instructive. And in this environment, improvement becomes inevitable, not because you are talented, but because you are exposed. Exposure creates adaptation. Adaptation creates competence. Competence creates value. The process is mechanical, but it requires a level of humility that most people resist. Because to operate this way means accepting that your early outputs will be poor, that your performance will be inconsistent, that you will be compared, directly or indirectly, to those operating at a higher level. And that comparison will not be flattering. But this is precisely where growth is accelerated, because instead of guessing what good looks like, you observe it. You study the top 10%. You analyze their outputs, their structure, their decisions, their patterns, not to admire them, but to extract what works, and then you apply it, repeatedly, relentlessly, until the gap between you and them begins to close. This is optimization, not theoretical improvement, but practical refinement based on real-world feedback. Each iteration is not a guess. It is an adjustment, and over time, these adjustments compound into something far more powerful than raw knowledge. They create precision. Machiavellian thinking aligns perfectly with this approach. Niccolò Machiavelli did not advocate for idealism. He observed reality as it is, not as it should be. And in doing so, he understood that outcomes are shaped by action, not intention, by execution, not philosophy. And in modern terms, this translates into a simple principle. The man who acts imperfectly will always surpass the man who prepares perfectly, but never acts. Passive learning, therefore, is not just ineffective. It is dangerous, because it creates the illusion of progress without the presence of results. It allows individuals to feel productive while remaining unchanged. It delays confrontation with reality, and the longer this delay continues, the more difficult it becomes to correct. The disciplined individual rejects this entirely. He does not measure learning by hours spent consuming. He measures it by outputs produced, by attempts made, by iterations completed. If there is no output, there is no learning. If there is no feedback, there is no improvement. And if there is no improvement, there is no progress. The conclusion is harsh, but precise. Slow learning is not a threat. Inaction is, because the man who learns slowly but acts consistently will eventually reach competence, while the man who learns endlessly but never applies will remain trapped in potential. And potential, in the real world, has no value. Only execution does. Strategy 5. Using money as a weapon. Most people treat money as a reward, something to be spent after effort, something to be enjoyed as compensation for work, and in doing so, they convert money into temporary satisfaction rather than long-term advantage. Because consumption, by its nature, is terminal, it ends where it is used. It produces no leverage, no multiplication, no future return. The disciplined individual sees money differently. He does not see it as a reward. He sees it as a tool, a mechanism for increasing his ability to generate more of it. Money, when used correctly, is not spent. It is deployed, and like any tool, its effectiveness depends on how it is used. There are 3 primary directions in which money should be deployed if the objective is growth rather than comfort. The first is tools. Anything that increases your output, your efficiency, your reach, or your speed falls into this category. Because time is limited, and tools allow you to extend your capacity beyond natural constraints, whether through automation, software, systems, or infrastructure. And while these may appear as expenses, they are, in reality, force multipliers. The second is guidance, mentors, courses, frameworks. These are not about information, but about compression of time, because instead of discovering everything through trial and error, you are leveraging the experience of those who have already navigated the path, reducing unnecessary mistakes, avoiding predictable failures, and accelerating your trajectory. The third is experimentation. This is where most people hesitate, because experimentation involves uncertainty, spending money without guaranteed outcomes, testing ideas that may not work. But this is precisely where growth occurs, because without experimentation, there is no data, and without data, there is no optimization, and without optimization, there is no scaling. Every successful system is built on iterations that once appeared uncertain, and those who refuse to invest in experimentation remain static. Machiavelli's perspective on resources reinforces this approach. He emphasized that power must be maintained through active management, not passive possession, and in financial terms, this means money that is not actively used to strengthen your position will inevitably weaken it, because inflation, opportunity cost, and stagnation erode its value over time. Money that sits idle loses power. Money that is deployed strategically gains it. This leads to a critical conclusion. If your money is not being used to increase your ability to generate more money, it is, in effect, controlling you rather than serving you, because you become protective of it, afraid to risk it, unwilling to deploy it, and in that state, you are no longer using money as a weapon. You are guarding it as a limitation. The disciplined individual avoids this trap. He does not spend carelessly, but he also does not hoard passively. He allocates with intent. Every dollar has a purpose. Every expense is evaluated based on its potential to increase future income. And over time, this creates a compounding effect, because money invested into capability produces more capability. Capability produces more income, and more income, when reinvested correctly, accelerates the cycle. This is how leverage is built, not through sudden gains, but through consistent, strategic deployment. Strategy 6. Rejecting the performance of wealth. As income increases, a new danger emerges. Not external pressure, but internal expansion. Desire grows. Standards shift. What once felt sufficient becomes inadequate. And without discipline, this leads to a predictable pattern. Income rises, expenses rise with it, and the individual finds himself in the same position as before, dependent, constrained, and controlled, only now at a higher level. This is the trap of lifestyle inflation, and it is one of the most effective mechanisms for maintaining control over individuals who believe they are progressing, because it gives the appearance of success while preserving dependency. The disciplined individual recognizes this pattern and interrupts it. He refuses to upgrade his lifestyle in proportion to his income, not because he cannot afford to, but because he understands the cost of doing so. Every upgrade is a commitment, a new baseline, a higher requirement for stability, and therefore a reduction in flexibility. He does not spend to signal, because signaling is a form of seeking validation, and validation creates vulnerability. If your sense of worth is tied to external perception, your behavior will be shaped by it. You will make decisions not based on strategy, but on how they are received, and in doing so, you surrender control. He does not live according to the expectations of others, because expectations are a form of invisible constraint. They dictate what is acceptable, what is desirable, what is normal. And the moment you begin to align your life with these expectations, you are no longer operating independently. You are conforming. Machiavelli understood the importance of perception, but he also understood the danger of being controlled by it. He advised rulers to manage how they are seen, but never to become dependent on approval, because dependence on approval limits action, and limited action reduces power. In modern terms, this means you may control your image, but you must never be controlled by it. The conclusion is direct. Those who appear rich are often the most constrained, because their lifestyle requires continuous maintenance, continuous income, continuous validation, and any disruption threatens the entire structure. Those who retain their resources, who resist unnecessary expansion, who operate below their means, are the ones with actual power, because they can endure, they can adapt, they can wait. And in any competitive environment, the individual who can endure longer than others has an inherent advantage, because time, when combined with discipline, becomes a force multiplier. So the distinction becomes clear. There are those who spend to be seen, and there are those who accumulate to act. One seeks approval, the other builds control, and in the end, only one of them holds power. Strategic mindset, active first, passive later. One of the most dangerous modern illusions is the belief that passive income should be the starting point, that one can escape effort before mastering it, that systems can replace skill before skill is even built. This thinking is not just naive, it is structurally weak, because it attempts to reverse the natural order of power. Passive income is not a foundation, it is an outcome, a consequence of systems built on top of control, not a shortcut to bypass it. The disciplined individual understands this clearly. He does not seek escape. He seeks dominance over the process. And that begins with active income, with direct engagement, with the ability to generate money through his own actions, decisions, and skill, without relying on mechanisms he does not yet understand. Active income is not something to graduate from. It is where capability is forged under pressure, where feedback is immediate and unavoidable, where failure cannot be hidden behind theory or delayed results. When you are responsible for producing income directly, you are forced into clarity. You see what works and what does not. You adjust, you refine, and over time, you build something far more valuable than money itself, the ability to create it at will. This ability is the true asset, because once you possess it, you are no longer dependent on a single employer, a single platform, or a single opportunity. You become adaptable. And adaptability is the core of resilience. From there, accumulation becomes natural, not forced, not fragile, but structured, because consistent income produces surplus, and surplus creates options. Only then does investment become meaningful, not as an escape from work, but as an extension of your capability, a way to amplify what you already understand. Money earned actively carries with it context. You know how it was created, what variables mattered, what risks were involved, and this allows you to deploy it with precision rather than speculation. Only after this sequence, active generation, disciplined accumulation, strategic investment, does passive income begin to emerge. And even then, it is not truly passive in the simplistic sense. It is supported by systems that still require oversight, but now your involvement is leveraged rather than linear. Niccolò Machiavelli warned against relying on forces outside one's control, and the principle translates directly. Only those who have mastered the flow of money through their own actions have the right to delegate that flow to systems. Until then, dependence is inevitable, and dependence is vulnerability. You do not begin with freedom, you earn it through control. And only when control is stable does freedom become sustainable. Conclusion. The first threshold of freedom. The number itself is unimpressive. $100,000 will not change how the world sees you. It will not grant you status. It will not place you among the visibly wealthy, but it will quietly change how you experience reality. At this threshold, something internal shifts, not dramatically, but structurally. For the first time, you are no longer forced into every decision, no longer cornered by urgency, no longer negotiating from weakness in every situation. You gain something invisible but decisive: space. Space to think, space to choose, space to refuse. And refusal is where power begins. Because the ability to say no to bad deals, to pressure, to conditions that do not serve you, is what separates those who are controlled from those who control. Before this point, refusal is expensive and dangerous. After it, refusal becomes strategic. You are no longer taking what is available, you are selecting what is aligned, and that shift alone changes the trajectory of your life. This is not wealth in the conventional sense. It is not luxury or excess. It is the beginning of personal sovereignty. But this threshold is not an endpoint. It is a position, a base, a fragile advantage that must be protected and used correctly, because if treated as a signal to relax, to expand consumption, to chase appearances, it disappears, and with it, the control it created. You cannot build anything meaningful while you are still escaping instability. You cannot construct long-term strategy while your attention is consumed by short-term survival. You cannot build an empire while you are still running from your bills. Because building requires focus, and focus requires stability, and stability must be secured first.